My dear brothers and sisters, Surah Al-Baqarah is a shield of mercy and protection because it carries the living words of Allah that surround the believer with divine care. When this surah is recited, it does not merely echo through the air, it settles into the heart and reshapes the soul. The Prophet ﷺ described it as a source of blessing and a defense against evil, reminding us that Allah's words are not passive but active in the life of a believer. This surah creates a spiritual boundary around the person, their home, and their faith, pushing away darkness that cannot survive in the presence of divine truth. In a world filled with anxiety, fear, and unseen struggles, Surah Al-Baqarah becomes a refuge. Fear and unseen struggles, Surah Al-Baqarah becomes a refuge and offering reassurance that Allah's mercy is closer than the worries that surround us, and His protection is stronger than anything that seeks to harm us. This surah teaches that true protection begins from within, starting with belief, sincerity, and consciousness of Allah. From its opening verses, Surah Al-Baqarah describes guidance for those who are mindful of their Lord, establishing that mercy flows toward hearts that seek Him honestly, flows toward hearts that seek Him honestly. It reminds the believer that Allah sees effort, not perfection, and rewards the struggle to remain upright in times of weakness. Through its verses, Allah reassures His servants that guidance is always available, even after mistakes and missteps. This is a protection from despair, which is one of the greatest dangers to the human heart. When a believer holds firmly to Surah Al-Baqarah, hope replaces hopelessness, and trust in Allah replaces fear of the unknown. Surah Al-Baqarah is also a shield because it teaches patience and the reliance on Allah during trials. It speaks openly about tests, hardships, and moments of loss, showing that these experiences are part of the believer's journey, not signs of abandonment. Allah reminds us that every difficulty carries wisdom, and that every difficulty carries wisdom, and that steadfastness brings immense reward. This understanding protects the heart from breaking under pressure and prevents the soul from turning bitter or distant from Allah. Instead of questioning divine wisdom, the believer learns to surrender and say that everything belongs to Allah and returns to Him. In this surrender lies a deep sense of peace, where the heart feels guarded against panic, regret, and anger. And again, knowing that Allah's plan is always wrapped in mercy, knowing that Allah's protection in Surah Al-Baqarah comes through its emphasis on worship, obedience, and remembrance of Allah. It repeatedly calls the believer back to prayer, charity, and sincere devotion, teaching that closeness to Allah is the strongest defense against spiritual harm. Teaching that spiritual harm, when a person establishes salah and keeps their tongue moist with dhikr, their heart becomes illuminated, making it difficult for negativity and whispers to take root. Surah Al-Baqarah nurtures this connection by reminding the believer that Allah is near, aware, and responsive. This awareness builds a protective barrier around faith, ensuring that even when the world pulls in different directions, the heart remains anchored to its Creator with calm confidence and inner strength. The mercy of Surah Al-Baqarah is most clearly felt in its reminders of Allah's compassion and fairness. It teaches that Allah does not burden a soul beyond its capacity, offering relief to hearts weighed down by guilt and exhaustion. This promise protects believers from self-destruction through excessive blame or unrealistic expectations. It allows the servant to breathe, to continue striving without feeling crushed by shortcomings. Surah Al-Baqarah gently reassures that Allah understands human weakness and opens doors of forgiveness again and again. In this reassurance, the believer finds safety, knowing that as long as they turn back sincerely, Allah's mercy will continue to surround them and His protection will never be withdrawn. Ramadan is the month of return, not perfection. Because Allah never invited flawless souls, only sincere ones. This blessed month comes to hearts that are tired, distracted, and sometimes broken, calling them gently back to their Creator. Many people delay repentance thinking they must first become better, cleaner, more disciplined, but Ramadan teaches the opposite lesson. You come as you are, with your flaws, your regrets, and your weakness, and Allah receives you with mercy. Fasting is not a display of strength, but an admission of need, a quiet confession that without Allah we are nothing. Hunger softens the heart, thirst humbles the ego, and long nights remind the soul where it truly belongs. Ramadan removes the illusion of self-sufficiency and replaces it with reliance on Allah, teaching that returning sincerely is more beloved than pretending to be perfect. This month reminds the believer that Allah's door is always open. No matter how one has drifted, achi, duk, has dok. Ramadan does not ask where you were last year or how consistent you have been. It only asks whether you are willing to turn back now. Even those, whether you are willing to turn back now, even those who have neglected prayer, fallen into sin, or lost motivation, are welcomed without judgment. Allah does not shame His servants when they return. He honors them, the atmosphere of servants when they return. He honors them. The atmosphere of Ramadan itself becomes a support, making repentance feel lighter and hope feel closer. Every sunset brings another chance. Every sunset brings another chance. Every suhoor, another beginning. The believer learns that returning once is not enough, but returning again and again is beloved to Allah. This understanding protects the heart from despair and teaches that sincerity matters more than perfection. Ever could the self, this a form of worship, ever could. Ramadan also teaches that struggle itself is a form of worship. Many people feel unworthy because they stumble even in this sacred month, but Allah sees the effort hidden behind those struggles. Fasting while battling habits, praying while battling habits, praying while fighting laziness, and resisting temptation while feeling weak are signs of life in the heart. Perfection would require no effort, but return requires humility, and humility is beloved to Allah. Ramadan trains the believer to keep getting back up without self-hatred or hopelessness. Each time you fall and stand again, your heart becomes softer and more aware of Allah's presence. The goal is not to emerge flawless by Eid, but to emerge closer, more conscious and more honest with Allah than before. In Ramadan, Allah shifts the focus from appearance to intention. Long prayers, charity and Qur'an recitation are not meant to impress others or inflate the ego, but to rebuild the relationship between the servant and the Lord. Even small deeds carry immense weight when done sincerely in this month. A quiet dua, a tear shed in private, or a moment of restraint can outweigh actions done for show. Ramadan teaches that Allah looks at hearts before actions, sincerity before consistency. This frees the believer from comparison and competition, allowing them to focus on their own journey of return. When intention is pure, even imperfect actions become a means of nearness. And the heart begins to feel lighter with each sincere step toward Allah, Ramadan ultimately reminds the believer that Allah loves those who return, not those who claim flawlessness. The Qur'an describes Allah's oft forgiving and most merciful, and Ramadan is the living expression of these names. Why are you punishing me? Nights of forgiveness, days of patience, and moments of quiet reflection all serve one purpose: to pull the heart back to Allah gently. The believer learns that returning does not erase the past, but it reshapes the future. Through repentance, Allah replaces distance with closeness and heaviness with peace. Ramadan becomes a turning point, not because the servant became perfect, but because they chose to come back sincerely, trusting that Allah's mercy is greater than every mistake and kinder than every fear. Patience, salah, and tawakkul transform hardship into elevation because they realign the believer's heart with divine wisdom. When difficulty strikes, the first instinct of the human soul is panic, complaint, or despair. Yet Islam teaches a different response. Patience is not passive suffering, but conscious restraint, a choice to trust Allah while the storm passes. Through patience, the believer learns that hardship is not meaningless. It is carefully measured and deeply purposeful. Every moment of endurance polishes the heart and strengthens faith. Hardship becomes a classroom where the soul learns humility, reliance, and inner strength. Instead of asking why the test came, the believer learns to ask what Allah wants to teach through it. And this shift alone raises a person spiritually, even before the hardship ends spiritually, even before the hardship ends. Salah is the anchor that holds the hardship, and Salah is the anchor that holds the hardship when everything else feels uncertain. Standing before Allah brings clarity and calm. Salah is not an escape from hardship. It is a meeting with the one who controls it. In prayer, the believer pours out fear, confusion, and pain without needing to explain or justify anything. Each movement in Salah reminds the servant of their place before Allah, humbling the ego and soothing the soul. Bowing and prostrating teach surrender, while recitation revives hope through consistency. Not Salah, hardship loses its power. To crush the hardship loses its power to crush the heart, because the believer knows they are never facing it alone. This connection transforms pain into closeness and struggle into spiritual growth. Tawakkul completes this transformation by teaching the believer to rely on Allah without abandoning effort. Trusting Allah does not mean doing nothing. It means doing what you can while placing the outcome entirely in His hands. Tawakkul removes the unbearable weight of control from the human heart, allowing peace to settle even when answers are delayed. When a believer truly relies on Allah, fear of the future softens and anxiety loses its grip. The heart accepts that what is written will arrive with wisdom and mercy. This trust protects the soul from bitterness and impatience, replacing them with calm confidence. Through tawakkul, hardship becomes a means of elevation, because the believer grows closer to Allah while letting go of what they were never meant to control. Together, patience, salah, and tawakkul reshape the believer's perspective on trials. Hardship is no longer seen as punishment but as refinement. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to draw nearer to Allah and purify the heart. Patience guards the tongue and heart, salah strengthens the connection, and tawakkul stabilizes the soul. These three acts of worship work silently but powerfully, lifting the believer even when circumstances remain unchanged. The heart becomes resilient, less shaken by loss and more anchored in faith, because faith with the over time, the believer realizes that the real transformation was not the removal of hardship, but the growth that occurred within it, making the soul stronger, wiser, and more content with Allah's decree. In this process of elevation, the believer discovers that Allah's closeness is often felt most deeply during difficulty. Moments of weakness become moments of sincerity, where dua flows naturally and dependence on Allah becomes real. Passions teaches endurance, salah nurtures intimacy, and tawakkul builds unshakable trust. Together, they turn hardship into a ladder rather than a burden. The believer rises step by step, not because life became easy, but because faith became stronger. Through these acts of worship, the heart learns that every trial carries hidden mercy, and every difficulty has the potential to raise a servant's rank when met with patience, prayer, and complete reliance on Allah.